Hi, everyone. I am Olga Karanikos. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at Jove, and I want to thank you very much for joining us for the third and final session of Jove's three-part webinar series called Remote Learning: Findings from a Crisis Period. Today's session, The Hybrid Classroom of the Future, is going to take a look at how two of our professors joining us today have moved their courses to hybrid models and why this new classroom format may actually be the norm in the future. So before we proceed, I'd like to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. So if you can hear me okay, can you please use the raise hand icon in your toolbox and let me know? Excellent, thank you. If you do have any questions for either of our presenters at any point during the session, please ask them in the Q&A portion of your toolbox. And when you do, let us know if your question is directed to one of the presenters specifically or for both. We'll hold those questions to the very end of the session and I will ask them for you. Lastly, a recording of this webinar will be shared and emailed to you within 24 hours. So at the conclusion, you'll receive that. And also there will be a brief 5-question survey. If you can take a minute to follow through with that, we really would appreciate your feedback. It helps us to improve our webinars in the future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. First, we have Nir Ohad, who is the director of the Manna Center Program for Food and Safety and Security at Tel Aviv University, and Peter Ronai, the clinical professor of exercise science at Sacred Heart University. Thank you both so much for joining us. And Nir, I'll have you kick us off for today.
Well, thank you, Olga, for the introduction and for the opportunity. Thank you also for Jove for doing this webinar. So today we're gonna share with you our experience on hybrid teaching as we experienced it since the last semester of fall semester of 2020 and the way we're teaching it today on the new semester. So my name is Nir Ohad. I'm a professor at Tel Aviv University. I'm teaching almost 23 years basic and advanced classes. And today I'll share with you my experience and introductory to Biology B, or some of you may know it as Bio 102. We have 550 students in our class. We teach for 14 weeks, 4 hours per week. We share the course with 2 other professors. And our course textbooks is Biology by Campbell et al. By Pearson. So the course presents the basis of evolution, biodiversity, structure, and function. And I'm presenting the world of plants, mainly the evolution of plants, plants growth and development from structure to function. How do plants reproduce? Plant communication, as well as plant interaction with the environment, and breeding and biotechnology. So our teaching before the COVID-19 was done in a regular manner in class. This is our class, as you can observe it. I took a picture at the beginning of our previous semester before the summer break. Class is full, and you'll notice that a regular teaching mode was done aided by Moodle, where we present most of our materials. But in addition, at the back of the class, in this small box, we have an automated video that take the entire class while we present it to allow students to go and review the material later on. This will be very helpful when COVID-19 started, because we could have shared our previous lectures in a hybrid class, as I'll describe it next. So during the class, the students will see after the video, the presentation itself. Me and the board, as I was talking, will not go through it because of time. Right. So when COVID-19 broke, we had to reconsider how to do our teaching. And what we did, we first used our recordings to be provided to students ahead of time, and then allow them to interact with us during class time online to go over questions and special issues. So the hybrid class was meant to allow the students to access at ease, at their own time, their own convenience with the materials. and then to meet the students when possible over the regular class time to review the content of class, particular questions, and interact with the students. And that was the benefit of having the hybrid class. Offline, students can observe the recorded lectures online to review and go through special issues, which allows students much more grip of the material. So what were the tools that we're using through this hybrid class? Some of them were used even before, but I'll go through the special emphasis on how we did it. So during the summertime, I've recorded again all of our classes in a special unit where we can do a specialized recording to allow then the students to view the videos. And we did that in short sessions. So each lecture was broken into chapters to allow the students the ease and convenience to go through the lectures, not all at once. We then use the sessions for Q&A online with the students. We also added simple quizzes to allow students to check themselves and the way they acquire the material. And in addition, we added glossaries for them. In this case, you should note that in Israel, we teach freshmen and actually all bachelor degrees in Hebrew. Only the advanced classes are in English. So here we had a glossary for students, and we have students both from the Arab population. So we translated all our glossary items into English, Hebrew, and Arabic. We had a chat room. In this case, we're using Moodle. So there's an option for students to interact with the teachers as well as with tutors who can go with them over particular problems or issues. And we use special content. In this case, for instance, Jove animation, which is very helpful. So you can search the internet for many interactions and many animations, but in this case, Joves can help you to link it straight to the Moodle. This is just an example, very short one.
Transport of sugar between source and sink occurs in plant tissue called phloem. In angiosperms, phloem is composed of specialized cells called sieve tube elements.
Right, so you can see how we can go from the gross part of the plant into the fine detail up to a cell level and describe structure and function. So over the recordings I've done over summer, this is not in class, this is in a session where you can do a professional video, and I'll just show you a very brief content. You can see now the difference of how this is presented. It's in Hebrew. So we describe the transfer of water and the transfer of sap in the phloem over 100 meters of a sequoia tree. And then you can do advanced demonstrations, which I usually did in class. Here it goes. It will be a bit slow, just a minute. So here you can demonstrate, for instance, how water can be held and transferred in a tube. So what we see is a demonstration of cohesion and adhesion, which describe the physical forces at which fluid can be transferred in the plant. So when I reviewed what I've done in class so far, and I went through the internet like most of you do to look for hints and advice over the net for our lectures in a hybrid way, I found some of the thumbs of rules provided by Professor Moti Niger from Bar Ilan University here in Israel. Unfortunately, this was in Hebrew, so I translated them for you very briefly. And I guess since the presentation will be shared, you could enjoy using it later on. But in principle, in view of the difficulty of times of COVID, we should really engage with the students, show empathy. We should combine non-synchronized and synchronized sessions as we've just described. We should divide the content of our short talk into short talks to help and ease the students for understanding and going over the material. We use examples and demos I've just demonstrated. Add assignments such as the quizzes that can help the students to practice. And just notice that, especially when we just start the course and especially with freshman students, less is more. Let the students kick into the mode of university studies not in a non-tensional way. Um, we need to prepare Zoom and non-synchronized recordings properly, and if possible, to add materials to either to Moodle site or whatever site or platform you're using, and of course, communicate with our students. This is very important. So finally, so what we've learned from our previous semester towards the use of the hybrid approach was to, first and foremost, to adjust our means. And I'll go into that shortly, but the way we've took the lessons from our previous semester was to try, and especially for freshman students, first year students, to provide them as many tools as possible and to interact with them. Now, on this semester, the new semester that just started, we thought that students will be allowed to come on campus, maybe in small groups, but unfortunately Israel went into a second lockdown and students cannot come to campus anymore. We hope this will be changed shortly. So what we have done is developed a new model for mentoring our students. We have about 550 new students every year, about 100 faculty in our life sciences faculty. So every faculty is now mentoring 5 students personally, calling them, writing to them, looking into their needs, see what difficulties they have, and so on. So in essence, and we're coming to the end of my presentation, in order to save our students from this difficult times, especially freshman students who cannot come to campus, and it's a very difficult transition from studying in high school. Here in Israel, students have a gap of 2 to 3 years before they start studying after the military service, so it's even more difficult. We need to care for them and to fit the methodology to the students, to the stage of their degree, if they're freshmen or advanced students, to the number of students in class, to the discipline we're teaching, and to the content of what we're teaching. So I gave you a few examples to those. We need to have special care for special needs. There is no one silver bullet to address everything. As I said, freshman students needs mentoring, especially at the beginning. We need to generate a dialogue with our students to listen to their needs and to address them. And finally, to diverse the methods of teaching and to allow a gradual increase in load to allow students to engage into their studies gradually. I'll stop here. I'll take any questions. I thank you for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you, Nir. And we'll pass it over to you, Peter, and then get to a discussion and some questions afterward for both of you.
Okay. So I will share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Not quite yet.
Okay. Hopefully this will come up for you.
All right, there we go. We're in business.
All right, beautiful. All right, so let's start from the beginning. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much, Joe, for making this possible and for inviting me to do this with Nir. Nir, thank you for such a great presentation. I'm from the College of Health Professions at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. And my presentation is a little bit different. It's geared toward working with students live, but also with a hybrid model. And the students that I will be sharing some experiences with are students that are getting undergraduate degrees in exercise science and will either become exercise physiologists or strength and conditioning professionals, or they will go into cardiac rehabilitation or cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, or they will go into our physical therapy, occupational therapy, or physician assistant or nursing schools. We also have a master's program, so some of what I'm addressing today will concern some of our masters of exercise science professionals as well. So my objectives, these are my objectives for today, are just talking a little bit about the benefits of flipping the classroom. So a little different than Nir's model, our students are going to be meeting for the most part together, and it's a very hands-on program. So students have to learn how to assess one another's health-related physical fitness, their physical function, physical performance, their ability to perform sports skills, functional skills, activities of daily living and such. And so they have to actually work closely with one another with protection and with masks and shields. And so we had to rebound and go 100% online last spring. And then we've been allowed over the course of time this year to start working with people. What's been extremely helpful is using the flipped classroom model. And what I mean by that, I will walk you through in just a moment, but it means us providing enough background material, videos, articles, and such, and pre-recorded information and case studies to whet the appetite to get the students ready and interested in learning, and then bring them to class so that when they get in, they're ready to perform and to do all the skills with minimal amounts of extra discussion and extra explanations. So it's worked really well so far. And these are some of the benefits of flipping the classroom, especially with lab activities, is that when students have an understanding of what they need to do ahead of time and they can see it, and they have the science background provided for them, and then they have pictorials and video clips and narrated clips of this, it sometimes works better than just a lab manual when you come to class, because you've sort of seen it, you have an understanding of how it works and what it's supposed to look like prior to coming. And we found this semester that the students themselves feel very well prepared with that. One thing I want to mention too is, unlike Nir's presentation, my students this particular semester are upperclassmen, juniors, seniors, and graduate students. And so it's a little bit different working with that population than it is with freshmen that you haven't met before, of course. Doing a flipped classroom allows us more time for critical thinking. So we like to use a lot of case studies, clinical type case studies, where we're presenting facts about a patient, a client, what have you, and having the students work with us on coming up with proper solutions as they would in the real world. And by flipping the classroom and providing them with some of the background on the case ahead of time and giving them some of the tools that they need, makes them hungry to do this and makes them sort of more interested in doing it. And their responses are really good. And their comments are that they feel like they're really learning for the first time to work with a real person. Oh, after 3 years of classes, I really feel like I'm doing something. I really feel like when I go out there, I'm going to know what to do. They're able to better connect the theory with real practice. They're able to make critical decisions and see how things that they've previously learned are going to fit going down the line. So some of the skills that we use for flipping the classroom are, as I mentioned previously, case studies. Our students have to perform a final case presentation of a client or a patient. And our courses are all set up with that in mind. So they're always thinking about that. We try to make everything relevant so that they're not wondering, why are we covering all this material? Where's it going to go for us? And so they're always thinking, we're always reverting back to the final end result. So they're always thinking about that. And we said, so next year, when you're in PT school, you're going to have to do this or do this. You're going to have a patient that does this. So let's take a look at that. So before we come to class, let's look at some of these things so that we're ready to do them. So that's also very helpful to them, but it's very helpful to us. So we use this for things like pre-activity movement screenings, functional assessments, fall risk assessments, health-related fitness and performance testing assessments. As you see here, you see some of the students. These are our students performing some of these things. And so we like to put pictures of the students and video clips of the students involved in doing some of these things, previous students, so that they have an idea, and then we can dialogue when they're looking at these things. So we found that filling the PowerPoint, so here's a test, the person's doing a physical fitness test, a bench press test, an overhead squat assessment, gait speed test, which is the 6 vital sign. So they're learning how to do all these things, but they see them and they get a firsthand look at all of those. So things that work well, a daily opening discussion or a scenario. So when we paint a picture of where we're going to go, if we make this client-oriented, athlete-oriented, patient-oriented discussion, students are dialed in immediately. they're thinking about, oh, they're putting their clinical hat on and they're thinking like, that's me. I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to make that decision. I'm going to have to help that person. Then all the other stuff just kind of falls in place. It becomes relevant and contextual. So the how-to videos, I think, are really important. And I will say that I've found the Jove clinical skills videos extremely helpful, and in particular for my exercise testing and prescription course. So it's skills number 3. The pre-activity physical exam videos have been extremely helpful. And in my functional anatomy class, the physical assessments, the manual muscle testing, the functional range of motion testing, goniometry testing, and special tests have been really very, very helpful. So I post those ahead of time in the relevant sections or content areas of the course, and they're very helpful. And that course is a cadaveric anatomy course as well. It involves that. So these videos kind of relate to the gross structural anatomy that we're looking at when we're talking about structure, and then relating it to function. So it's a nice marriage of those two. Voiced over lectures ahead of time have saved a lot of time in the classroom so that we can get into doing more practical things during the actual sessions, both in lecture discussion and in labs. And descriptions and animations, as you see, I purposely put a lot in here because, again, the students like that and they can relate to it. So what are some other tools that help flipping the classroom? Blackboard Ultra. Our university is now piloting a new version of Blackboard learning platform. It's called Ultra, and it's very new. And it's a good management system, learning management system, and it's evolving and has many applications where you can post videos, nice videos. You can actually put any relevant content you want in there, and you can have really great discussions with it, with the class. And so we're using that. We're finding that to be very, very helpful. Again, the pre-recorded video, animations of things. I like to put animations in my lab manuals and links in the lab manual. When we discuss a skill, they can click on it and watch it for a brief moment. And then when they come to lab, they can see it there. So it's not just in the PowerPoint, and it's not just in class discussion. I embed these things into the lab manual because we have found that students are very visual learners, very hands-on learners, very tangential. They have to be able to see things and see where they're going to go and experience them. So the more of that we can do, the better it is. And it helps us to scaffold skills up, like the final case presentation that we're talking about. When we teach things in pieces and we have pictorial and we have a moving video and descriptive information in there for them, it helps them in turn have to do that themselves. YouTube is very good if you know what to look for, and if you're skilled, and if you have the time to scrutinize and to look through things, it can be very good and it can be extremely helpful. But you have to be an educated consumer, and you have to get the right amount of time, because there've been some studies on the use of videos, and it seems that depending on the purpose of the instructional video, that your video should be anywhere from 2.5 minutes or less. And there's some skills that are best told by a 30-second story, and there are others that a minute or a minute and a half can be very helpful. But pretty much after that, if you're getting over 2.5 minutes, then you're probably better off breaking your videos into smaller pieces and scattering them through the lesson, because most students are not going to stay on for much more than that. So that's kind of an important piece if you're going to use a pre-recorded that you've done, or you're going to harvest it. So I like to also align quizzes with videos and with webinars, so that it reinforces the learning, and it ensures that they're going to get the right information that you need out of something post a webinar, but construct a quiz that's very relevant to that, so that the key points, learning points, are in there, and you know exactly where in the webinar they are, and scatter the questions so it forces them to have to watch the whole webinar and pull those salient points up. These are the courses that flipping has been extremely helpful. So this is graduate functional anatomy, exercise testing and prescription, exercise testing and prescription lab, exercise and aging. These are some of the activities that students have to learn to do with patients and clients. They get a chance to see these, they get a chance to learn about them, and then by all means, most importantly, they're doing these on each other. And I'm going to stop there. My presentation is not very fancy, meant to be just mostly hands-on for you. And thank you very much. Thanks, Jove, and thank you, Nir, and everyone for enabling me to come and be a part of this.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so we've got a pretty captive audience here and a bunch of questions I'm going to get to. So I'll start fielding that for everybody. And if you haven't submitted your question yet and have any for either presenter or both, please feel free to pass those through in the Q&A and we'll get to as many as we have time for. So we've had a lot of questions about engagement in general from your students. So I'll kind of pick through a few of them and get your comments. So Nir, a question for you. If you gave the students some videos to watch and then have them in online classes, do you feel like it's a high student workload or did you reduce the online class time?
So the online class time is meant to review the material and go through those issues that the students had more difficulty with them. So, and it's not mandatory. So students can choose whether they want to engage into the class time. And if they feel it's useful for them, they'll stick in. So what I try to do is bring it from a different angle. It's not just a repetition of what they've seen on the video or in the recorded class. And I think that's how they can benefit.
Great. And then for both of you, how do you activate students to increase their participation during virtual lectures? Do you ask questions, make comments, et cetera? What have your successful tactics been? Maybe Nir, if you want to take that one first.
Okay, so, it's different between a large class. So if you teach a class of hundreds of students, it's much more difficult to do interaction with all of them. Though we do open the session from time to time to questions, even on live microphones and video, so to give the students an opportunity to engage. But we do on live, you have opportunities and measures to do even on Zoom questionnaires, or you can use other softwares or other programs to try and use online quizzes during the session or afterwards. And this is just to help the students to review the material and test themselves.
Peter, what would you say?
So in one of my classes, the really large undergraduate class, we have to do we have to stream the lecture because we're only allowed to have half of them in the classroom. The other half are at home watching remotely, and then vice versa, we flip. So in a situation like that, I'm very much engaged in teaching live, but at the same time, I have to be aware of the fact that there are people watching. So we basically use the chat and the Q&A for students, and I'll stop frequently and just ask a question of the audience. And first important thing is make sure they can hear you and see you. But the other piece is I welcome live input from people that are watching for them to feed through in the chat. But the other thing is I post a lot of quizzes. I have a lot of quizzes as assignments. So I have lots of, and I use various types of assignments throughout the semester so that if they weren't engaging, they wouldn't be able to answer half the questions on these tests or these quizzes or these assessments. So they know ahead of time what the assessments are that are going to be posted, and they open up at a specific time. So they already have a vested interest when they're coming to class because they know what they're going to be sort of held accountable for. And it's at a level of information that they're sort of already engaged in, and the other thing I will say is that by putting all of the information up ahead of time like that, the students are very much engaged because they know they're going to get something very different than they would have if we just went over the PowerPoint. It's always interactive. It's, as I mentioned earlier, a case study. They watch videos of somebody going through a movement assessment, and they have to look at it and determine what's wrong or what isn't right, and then what you would do with it. What are the things you should do to correct that? What exercise selections might you make and things? And the people at home and the ones in class are equally as engaged in that.
Great. And to go along with that engagement, then, how do you identify and assist any students who might appear to be disengaged or losing motivation or struggling through these new formats?
Nir, I don't know if you want to take that first and then I'll follow after.
Okay, again, I think it needs to be adjusted to the type of class you're having. To follow up on 200, 300, 400 students at once in a big lecture hall or on online class, it's very difficult. Even if you ask the students to open their cameras and to be engaged, it's very difficult. So it is upon the teacher, for the professor, to do his best to pose, to ask questions, to see that the students are following, but he cannot verify that all of them are online and engaged. It's up to the students. So it's a difficult task. And that's why under these circumstances where the online teaching is the only way, it's not just a repetition. If you don't have the means to record, and well, these days you can, even on Zoom, you can record the class and students can go back and view the lecture again, so that's no problem. I think it's just consider that depending on the type of class, how you perform, how you provide information in a way that will be easy and reasonable for the students to follow on it.
Peter, would you have anything to add?
No, I think that the situation that Nir is in is very challenging because these many times we've spoken offline are students, younger students earlier in a program, and students that you haven't necessarily met face to face. The situation that I'm reporting is these are students that have suddenly, over the course of a few years, found themselves having to do some of their studies either completely online or in a hybrid situation. So their backgrounds and their preparation are a little bit different. So I have the luxury of being able, the things I'm talking about are probably a little easier. In my situation, some of them would not apply if I had not met these students beforehand and they were like freshmen, vice versa. But the way that I know it is my students, we have a very good rapport. So they'll let me know, and I can tell by their performance on the assignments and on the tests, and I can then turn and I can contact them or reach out to them. So strategically having these assignments helps me. It's like a litmus paper, a litmus test. I can tell how they're doing, and it prompts me to contact them and to open up a dialogue.
Wonderful.
But with a smaller group, I can do that. Not the same when you have 400 or 500 students as Nir has. So it's in context. Everything has to be taken into the, into the context.
Exactly so, but we still have additional tools. And so for instance, you can have these classrooms where you have chat rooms on the Moodle, where we can provide many teachers that will assist us, assisting teachers, TAs, that can divide the class into small groups and then help the students to interact and to ask direct questions, even online or offline on the chat room. That's possible. So that can be as an assistance for the main lecture in the class.
Great. And Nir, we did get a question on just in general your time management. How are you making it through when you are pre-recording lectures as well as delivering live sessions? It sounds like you're doubling your work.
Indeed, it's a lot of work. I've spent this summer in recording many of my classes. Each recording took me, just the recording, more than half a day, and to prepare the class for the recording took me almost a day. So it's a lot of investment, but I think since this is an introductory course, we'll be able to use it for the years ahead. And the fact that we've recorded it in small parts, so every lecture is divided into 5, 6 portions, which can be then adjusted and changed if needed to introduce new materials. So we'll have the opportunity to update these lectures in the future.
Great. And a question for both of you, and Peter, you touched on this a little bit in your presentation as well, but we have a professor who has the need, obviously, to replace some practical lab sessions with online ones. How do you do this? What was the student feedback? And I promise they asked this question, but did you use Jove?
Yeah. So would this be okay for me to try this one, to answer this one? Yeah. So actually, there are a lot of programs, at least here, especially in the United States, that have chosen or have been forced to do all their lab work online. And there's special interest group through the American College of Sports Medicine that has actually worked on harvesting a whole series of videos for lab professors in the exercise sciences, as an example, movement sciences. And so what we've done is we've cataloged all of those, and we have links, and that's available through the American College of Sports Medicine through their exercise science teaching special interest group. You can go online and get that, but that's an ongoing project. And the reason I brought that up is it becomes really important, this whole being able to see things ahead of time. There's certain things we've had to change the way we are doing labs too, because they have to be shorter, because we have to clean the labs between every group of students that come. And we're getting half the time that we normally have. So we have to be selective with the skills that we're testing people on. So it's not the same. And so one of the things that is helpful is to develop assessments that are online that you can post that have simulations and things like that. It's very challenging to do that, but being able to produce and videotape or have photo images of things that now your students have to analyze them and critically look at them and solve a problem, whether it's short answer, multiple choice, and they have to look qualitatively and answer critically versus get their hands on it and take the blood pressure or measure a skin fold, body fat, or what have you, or measure with the goniometer. Now you have to watch it. You have to sort of look at it and see if there's something wrong in the technique that was used, or, you know, what did you see? What did you hear, kind of a thing. And I think that's going to be a very big and ongoing opportunity that we're going to all have to probably use more of during the time to come. Joe's been helpful with the clinical examination, the clinical skills, especially clinical skills 3, because as I mentioned before, the range of motion measurements, the manual muscle testing, heart rates, blood pressures, peripheral pulse assessments, all of those things. The videos are excellent for that. And so they're a good how-to and a good introductory preparatory type of a thing. But I think that it's an unknown yet what the right mix is of practical versus an online assessment of real world skills.
If I may add, so I think, you know, in the spring semester, we had one class, I was not teaching it, on biochemistry lab class that was using videos in order to cover some of the materials that the students have missed because they couldn't come to class. I think these types of videos can help you to understand the type of procedures that students could have been using, but it cannot replace the actual experience that the students will acquire in a real lab class. And the only solution for that will be to bring them back to class. So I think this is a temporal thing. It will help to, in the future, for teaching, to acquaint students with methodologies, to look at them beforehand, so it will be easier for them when they go into the lab and do it hands-on, to have already an acquaintance with the procedure or the tools they're using, but it would not replace their real experience. It's like you cannot teach a surgeon to do a surgery just from watching a movie. He has to have, at the end, his experience hands-on.
Great. And moving on to one topic we've had many questions about, but just looking at the end results, student success outcomes, feedback in general, and related to that, you know, give us a little bit of a sense of what you've seen as far as your student outcomes, but also, are you seeing any disparities in those outcomes based on student access to technology or lack thereof? And have you used specific tools that are helping you with any of those assessments?
So in our case, I'll start with the end result. And if I judge by the final grades and the final exam, so the grades that we've given our students were based both on the quizzes they've done all year long, or through the semester actually, 10 quizzes, and they've got what we call defense mark, which means they've got a grade for every quiz they did. And at the end, they received 20 or 30% of their grade based on the quizzes, but this grade could never be lower than the final exam grade. So it will never harm them. It will just help them to study and improve their situation. and it motivated the students to go through the material of the class through the semester. The end result was that their grades were as the same average as previous years. So that means teaching under the COVID-19 with the tools we've been using worked. Whether this was an overload on the students, I guess so. You know, if they need to look at the videos pre-hand before the class and then interact also in class, that means they need to spend more time, both at home and online. But students found their own way where to put their emphasis. And to be honest, not all students engaged in online classes through the semester, and that's fine as long as they got the material and were able to answer the quizzes. That's fine with us. That's the idea. You know, these are students, they can learn by themselves. We provide the materials, we provide the means, the tools, and that's what it's all about.
And Peter, how about in your experience?
Yeah, not too much to add to what Nir said. Kind of pretty much the same thing, definitely.
Okay.
Really well.
And are either of you using any real-time assessment tools like Kahoot or polls, anything to keep track along the way?
Other than their you know, just actually hands, like I'm still doing lab assessments, like practical skills in the lab, and so I'm looking at how they're, you know, qualitatively performing skills, and we're not allowed to do any of our exams, any of our didactic exams. We're not allowed to bring people into a setting together to do, so everything has to be online from that perspective, you know, that end of it. So we're not really delving into some of those technologies for the testing. As I mentioned earlier, I do some online skills testing as well to simulate stuff, but they have to come in and do, as Nir said, you can't teach a surgeon how to operate without being there and everything. So, yeah. But aside from that, not really at this point.
Okay. And for both of you, was your transition to flipped classroom or the styles that you've adopted, was that mandated by your administration, or did you choose the format yourself?
So in our case, we had to go into online teaching, and the hybrid type was not mandatory. It was teachers could decide which way, and some did it in a full scale, some just added it or flavor it into their lectures. In our case, since I had already experience with presenting students in previous years, our videos just as a backup, it was a simple transition. And I think it was for the favorite of the students to have it in a hybrid way where they can see the lectures ahead of time and then use the time we have together to go over the things that are more difficult for them, or they had more questions, or they wanted to add extra information. So that worked fine.
And
for you, Peter, was it a choice or a directive?
Well, our university put an extremely significant amount of time into planning all of this. And they used what's called a flex model. And they have encouraged all of us, and, you know, again, with bigger groups, to see half the students, have half of them learning remotely, and then to flip. They encouraged us to try to get in as much hands-on as possible and as safely as possible, but also encourages us to try to do both synchronous and asynchronous teaching, so to try to do hybrid.
I may add that for the 3 basic courses in biology, the 3 introductory courses in biology for freshmen, we are encouraged to record our lessons ahead of time, and the university and faculty help us, all lecturers, to do this in order to help the students to be assisted by the hybrid class.
Our university, they've been very supportive of us, all of the professors, and made lots of learning opportunities available to us throughout the school year and over the summer, institutes to do a lot of this, because a lot of us we're not skilled at this, so they've given us the support to do that, and very supportive of that.
And that leads into a question we actually got. We have a director of online learning joining us from a small institution. She says, you know, many of her faculty have struggled to acclimate not only to the current situation, but even to using an LMS. They do use a Moodle product, as well as like original video production is a challenge. So for these type of faculty, what are some attainable things that you might recommend that could make it easier for their faculty to move to like a hybrid classroom? I know Peter, you touched on, skills training that your institution provided. Is there anything specific you could point out, or anything that either of you use to acclimate?
Well, we have the option of using either what's called lecture capture. We can use Zoom, we can use Teams, WebEx, and what I found is that faculty are not gravitating to one versus the other. There are different groups of people, and they're using what's most expedient for them and their students. Secondly, if you're not all that acclimated with some of this technology, getting the students involved in that, so maybe gravitating to more projects where the students are creating something using Zoom, using a chat room, using a Teams approach, and have them do some presentations or some interactive stuff to augment some of the skills that it might take us a little longer to learn has been helpful. Having the students doing some of those things, and because they are far, at least mine, they are far more adept at technology. And so tapping into the student and creating some assignments and some activities where their skills, they're actually able to capitalize on their skills fairly early in the semester has been really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Nir, would you have any recommendations?
So in our case, we had special teams that are mentoring the professors in order to help them to acquire the skills to work over Moodle. And we have a special studio to help and record lectures for the professors. And these are being done in accordance with the university mandate now to help all professors and all teachers to provide their lecture materials and in a way that will be easy and available to the students. I think it's more challenging, and you need more investment in those introductory courses where you have many students and you need to reach to all of those students at a different level, and the complexity of the type of material that you're providing in those courses, like in the case Peter is presenting, it's even more challenging because they have to teach skills, physical skills. It's not just theoretical material. Same thing will be for lab performance or lab training, as an example, as we described, like the biochemistry lab or other labs. And we have now exactly this uncertainty where I need to teach during this semester an advanced lab to third year biology students in biotechnology and advanced genetics. And how do you do such a lab where, you cannot find that on either site. It's all dedicated and design experiments that the students should run by themselves. We're just hoping that the lockdown will be removed and we'll be able to bring the students. Otherwise, it will be just for one time that we'll run just the theoretical part online, and we'll have to be obliged to skip the practical part, hoping that we'll have the means to fight COVID in the next coming year.
Right. And looking to the future, we actually have a bit of a debate going on with some people saying, the hybrid model is not the way to the future. We need to get back to as much human to human instruction and back to kind of the old ways. What's your take on where you see things going post-pandemic world? Like, is there anything from the current models you're using that you would carry out regardless that you find beneficial? Especially looking at remote teaching, blended styles of learning, what are your takeaways and how would you imagine potentially changing your classes that, when we go back to quote unquote normal life?
So my take is that I think the most important thing for students is to be engaged. I think the actual thing about learning in university and academic where you do research is to bring students to the environment where you do the research and allow them to engage and not do that remotely. But still, all the tools that we have developed will be helpful. They'll be non-mandatory. The students could be benefiting from them. So all the recordings, all the hybrid type of classes, all the glossaries, all the chat rooms still could be helpful, but at the end, would like to have the students back in class, into the labs. I think that will keep to make the teaching much better.
And Peter, what's your take?
I would agree with Nir. He hit it right on the head. I'm not sure when things are going to go back to normal exactly, but be that as it may, I think that the information that all of us collectively have had to pivot toward and develop will always be helpful. I think that it'll be good supplementary preparatory material, but I just don't think that for certain things that there's any substitute for face-to-face contact and hands-on, the performance. So I think that as soon as we can get back to doing that, I think things will be much better. And I don't think any of the stuff that we've talked about today will be wasted. I think it'll always be useful and helpful to bring people together. And that's pretty much it. I think that what we've done will always be useful, can be adapted, but there's no substitute for the real thing.
Yeah, okay. And given the difficulty of teaching practical skills, is there any thought about remedial work in the future, or is this generation of students going to kind of need to pick things up for themselves?
We've had to do that. And in fact, our physical therapy department this spring, students that were getting ready to graduate were not able to complete their final clinical placement, and they had to come back during the summer once our building was cleared to actually see students in a safe manner, and because they couldn't take their license exam without that. So had to have some flexible models of delivery. And for my class now, I've had to do makeup skills at times where it's quiet and there aren't too many people around, where we could social distance and do that. So I think that we have to, that can't go away. That has to be a part of it. There has to be some type of alternate model where students get brought back. I think Nir sort of reflected on that a little bit too, but it may mean, winter break or summer or something, bringing the students in to get what they missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nir, how are you handling remedial work?
So in our case, at least in my case, we have less need for doing hands-on, especially in training for skills. But to teach lab work, experimental work, that is equivalent to what Peter is describing. You have to have hands-on, you have to have someone who is monitoring you, showing you how to do things. And if we won't be able to do that in lab, it's going to hinder the acquiring of those skills. So we don't have a solution for it as long as we can't come into the lab at this point. We can share videos where we describe how to do it, but it won't teach you the practical part.
Right. Okay, and Peter, in health profession programs in particular, assessing effective domain is important. We have a professor who says they find it difficult to assess professionalism when everything's online. How do you do it?
It's a fantastic question, and absolutely true. Again, we are able to do some hands-on assessment of their skills, and so we implement on the skills checklist certain things that we expect them to say, certain questions, certain listening behaviors and stuff. So we make that a part of the protocol on our rubric that they have to do in the practical skills that we're still allowed to do with them. So that's one thing. And the other is we have to do case study. You have to use cases where we look and see, what went wrong with this situation. Can you folks think of something that they should have said, they should not have said, they should have done, they shouldn't have done? The soft skills kinds of stuff that you have to have, professionally, the real behavioral stuff. And so, a case study, but it's still, as Nir said, it doesn't replace the real face-to-face with people. So I don't profess to have any answers to any of your questions. These are just observations and suggestions more than anything else, but we implemented into some of the skills checks of the stuff that we're still allowed to do hands-on practically with people, then case study. That's why students go out and they actually do field placements, they do internships, and why we do so much hands-on stuff that we're really not able to do now. So as Nir said, I think it's just a challenge. I don't think we really know 100%, but that's the best that I'm able to come up with.
Okay.
I
Wonderful.
think if we would have known that COVID is going to hinder us for a long time, I'm sure that people would have started to develop alternatives to evaluate and to teach actual tools and actual skills. But since everybody is expecting that somewhere in the near future we'll have a vaccine and we'll be able somehow to overcome this, I think we're just waiting for this to happen. You cannot expect people to teach driving just by watching a video and then let someone go and drive a car just by watching a video, right? We would have known that this would last for 5-6 years. We would have found ways to teach them how to do that in a more practical manner. So we're in a balance.
Yeah.
Nobody told us this was going to happen.
There's no guidebook.
Oh, well, but I do think it's an opportunity for people out in the cyber world that are listening to develop some tools. And I also, I think this is a great opportunity for companies like Jove take some of this stuff to the next level, things that don't exist. And, I think it's important for instructors, professors to make lists of things that they're finding extremely challenging or missing in the current model, and to try to kind of create. I think I give tons of thanks and credit to Joe for doing this, because it sounds like your other presentations before this were really brought up a lot of thinking too, but I think we need to do a lot of this probably right now. I think it's kind of important, to do a lot of this, because we really don't know when we're going to be able to go back to the way normal was before. And there
Absolutely.
aren't that many answers, really, unfortunately. It's kind of scary, but yeah.
Part of the tools that could be helpful, and even in the near future, because some of these technology already exist, are 3D practicing and monitoring and viewing. So for some needs, I think this is already available. Is it already engaged into teaching and to guiding? Maybe at some places, maybe there's someone who's listening to us and has the means and can engage into exactly the problems that we're raising and can fit them. But I'm sure this is part of what can be offered in the next phase if we will need to use it in large scale. Of course, these are available already now, for people who want to feel and see. You can go touring 3-dimensionally. You can even try and practice like flying in a simulator with a 3D computer. So these tools might be helpful even to what we're talking about, but I don't think they've been adjusted yet or adapted yet.
Yeah.
I think there'll always be a learning curve, though, and there's also a generational thing with people who teach. Because I think the younger professors, academicians, and such have a different, let's say they have a different affinity for technologies than others. And that's a general statement, though. It's not true for everyone. So I think that going forward, a strategy to help people that are on different parts of the learning curve adopt some of these things will be important. That'll be important. I'm fortunate at my university, we have teaching fellows and a wonderful IT department that is always available for us to do this and to support each of us and work with us. We all need different amounts of hand holding with this. So I think that's going to be an important piece, is to be self-aware and know where your limits are and what you still need to learn before you go out there and, try to take the world on, so to speak.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it at that. We have hit time, but we're getting many, many thank yous from the audience. So I want to echo that both to Professor Ohad, Professor Ronai. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very insightful, great conversation. And I think you hit on it, Peter. It shouldn't stop here. It's really a lot of information sharing that we need to take forward. So we appreciate you being here. We'll do our best to continue these sessions. So I ask the audience, if you do have a minute after this conclusion to respond to our survey. We do ask you for future topics. We'd love to continue doing these sessions and get as much useful information out there to help everybody as we're continuing to work through this crisis. All right, well, thank you again, and I hope everybody has a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you're tuning in from.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for everything.
And health for everybody.
You too. Okay, bye, Nir. Bye, Peter.
Bye-bye. Bye, Peter.
Bye, Nir.
Bye. Bye.